everybody! Welcome back to another spooky episode of I've Said Too Much. I'm joined again by my bony friends, Leonard and Francine. So before I jump into everything, I just have to say that I really love Halloween. I was always a bit of a scaredy cat, which you're about to hear some good examples of. I think part of it is because I really love the fall, but mostly I feel like the whole month of October just kind of has this general spooky feel to it, and I just think it's really fun. I like feeling spooked sometimes, mostly from the safety of my own home. I think Halloween's a lot of fun, and that's why I wanted to do some of these spooky videos. But enough of all that babble. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is things that I was scared of when I was a kid. It did not take much. I also was a very sensitive child, so I feel like that probably lent a little bit to why I was just so scared of everything. So one of the big things I was afraid of, which I think a lot of kids are, is your typical ghosts and demons. I was raised in a Christian home, so I knew quite a bit about demons and that they were just bad. I also remember when that movie, The Exorcism of Emily Rose was coming out. One of the trailers was just a tape recorder and it was playing this so-called real recording of this girl that was possessed, and I still won't listen to that. That is just too much. I was also afraid of your typical monsters and the boogeyman and all that jazz. I had a very vivid imagination as a child, so it didn't take much for me to see a dark space and think, there's something in there. Just the usual small child paranoia, which kind of ties into my very large fear of the dark, which is another thing I think a lot of kids are afraid of. You don't know what's in that dark spot, and because of my crazy imagination, I just assumed anything dark was bad. There's scary stuff in there. Another thing I was afraid of that I don't think many people will relate to, I was afraid of the Backstreet Boys music video for Everybody. Everybody, yeah, rock your body, yeah. In that music video, they were all dressed up like different monsters and just singing and dancing around, being the Backstreet Boys. I vividly remember walking through Family Video with my mom, and they had it up on those little TVs in the corners. But I remember I saw part of it and I was like, oh, but I kept watching it, so I saw a lot of it. And I remember laying in bed that night and just thinking about that video. Yeah, it spooked me. Another thing I was afraid of was Goosebumps. I never read any of the books, mostly because the covers scared me and I knew that I wasn't gonna be able to handle it. At one point in 5th grade, my teacher decided to put on a Goosebumps movie for all of us. I didn't get any warning. I just had to sit there and pretend like everything was cool and I was digging the movie. I was not. I remember I was sitting with one of my friends and I was just making a bunch of stupid jokes and just talking through almost all of it. That's kind of my coping mechanism when I'm watching a scary movie or something. I tend to just make fun of it a lot, and then later I get really scared, but in the moment, making fun of it helps. I was also very afraid of dummies. Honestly, I was still creeped out by those things. I don't get it. I don't get why anyone likes them. I actually had a friend that had one, and he found out that I was scared of it and decided to chase me around the house with it. So much fun. And one more thing that I was really scared of was haunted house soundtracks. I remember my 2nd grade Halloween party, I was dressed up like a raccoon, and I had this thin plastic 3D mask that was the raccoon face. So we're all getting our treats and hanging out and stuff, and my teacher starts playing this soundtrack just to set the mood, and we're having a spooky Halloween party. It literally was just wind blowing and chains and some footsteps, and it played for I don't even know how long it was, maybe 2 minutes, if that. And I just started crying. I was sitting at my little table and I like kept my mask on. The teacher like notices I'm crying and I'm terrified, so she turns it off. And then one of my friends came up to me and they were like, hey Kaitlin, can we turn it back on? And I was like, no, of course not. It's terrifying. That's great. I ruined that Halloween party for everybody. Some of the things I'm scared of now kind of tie into that list before. I'm not afraid of the Backstreet Boys anymore. I actually was terrified of this when I was a kid too. Have always been, will always be. I am terrified of spiders. I know that's not an uncommon thing, but I can't even kill them. It doesn't matter how big or small they are. Nope. No. I am also afraid of and refuse to go to haunted houses and haunted mazes. And I'm talking about like the attractions. Like obviously I'm scared of actual haunted houses. Don't think I've ever been in one, but I have been in a haunted maze before, and that was the least enjoyable experience that I have ever had. So I'm not so much afraid of the like actors or like the people that jump out at me, because I know that's all fake. I just cannot handle that constant stress you feel. It's just walking down this path and you know at any minute someone's gonna jump out at you. You don't know when or where they're gonna come from. I can't handle it. It's not fun for me. I don't like to be stressed. I can understand why other people enjoy it, but it's just not for me. A few other fears I have that are a little more real world. A few fears that are more real world. I am afraid of being abducted and not by aliens. I'm afraid of being assaulted or attacked by a stranger while I'm just out somewhere. I just hear too many stories on the news, and strangers are crazy. You never know who's out there. I even live in a pretty safe area, and stuff like that doesn't really happen often around here. But even still, if you go travel somewhere, I don't know, it freaks me out. And kind of connected to that, I get a little scared at night whenever I'm camping, because there's a small part of me that's afraid that some crazy drunk person or some weird stranger is going to wander in our campsite at night and kill me in my sleep. And that one I don't think is that unrealistic. I have heard too many horror stories about that happening. This fear is very deep and serious, so I'm just going to say it as quickly as possible. I am afraid of dying. I do believe in an afterlife, but there's still some uncertainty in, how do I say this? Basically, I'm not ready to die. I'm afraid of dying, and I'm afraid of anyone else around me dying. I kind of mentioned this in one of my other videos about intrusive thoughts, because this is something that pops in my head a lot, and I don't think that one's that uncommon either, but there you have it. The last fear I'll mention, which is going to tie in with the rest of this video, I am afraid of ghosts and demons and paranormal things. Yet, I am so intrigued by them. My curiosity outweighs my fear sometimes. This intrigue and curiosity actually started when I was younger, and then when I got a little older, me and my sisters and my dad pretty hardcore into ghost hunters. We watched that all the time together. In a lot of those episodes, not that much stuff happens, but every now and then they would catch something really cool that they couldn't explain, and my little brain was like, and that love for that type of show carried into now I've watched a lot of different like YouTube videos of like ghost hunting and stuff. Some of my favorites are from Shane Dawson. He has a few videos on his channel where he did some like different ghost hunting things with all his friends. And honestly, if that could just be its own whole TV show, I would love that, because they mix a perfect amount of like humor and like real ghost hunting, and they're just great. And more recently, I started listening to this podcast called Two Girls, One Ghost. They like pick a different topic every week, and then they like talk about some like historical ghost story or some like historical place that's haunted or something like that. And then they share like listener stories. It's been really fun to listen to. I will admit there are times when I have to take a little bit of a break because thinking about ghosts that consistently kind of lingers with you a bit. All that interest in the paranormal and that podcast have kind of inspired this next thing that I'm going to talk about, which is actually some different experiences. So the first experience happened several years ago. I was still in elementary school. I had this very vivid dream that me and my dad were walking through this like abandoned department store. It was all dark and there was like no people. There wasn't like any clothes or anything, just some of those like racks around, and there's like this floodlight or something behind us that was shining towards the door that we were walking towards. So we just like walked down this big open store to this like metal door. My dad pushes it open and he goes outside, and it's like this like small parking lot that's only lit by one street light. And he tells me he's gonna go out first and like look around. I don't really know what he was checking for, but I just remember he goes out first. And then all of a sudden this big like swarm of crows. Is that the right word? Swarm. Flock of birds. Anyways, this big flock of crows comes swooping down at us. I remember I like crouched down and like put my hands over my head. I was like in a little ball. And I was like in between the door and the door frame, and all the birds came swooping down at me and started like pecking all over my back. In that moment, I started like slowly waking up, but as they were pecking me, it felt like someone was like poking their fingers all over my back, like really hard. Like it didn't hurt, but I felt it like physically, and I was like arching my back, and I woke up like all tensed up and like my back arched. And that's the last thing I remember. I just remember waking up after feeling my back like violently poked and just being like, the other experience I can think of happened even several years before that whole thing. We were in Arizona. Me and my sisters and my cousins were all sleeping in the same room. I remember waking up in the middle of the night, just kind of looking around the room, and I hear very clearly what sounds like my dad's voice say, "Christine," which is my little sister's name. And I looked over at the doorway and my dad wasn't there, and I didn't hear anything else. And I think at that point I was young enough that I didn't really like know that much about like ghosts and all that kind of stuff. So I don't remember like getting scared or freaked out at that moment. I was kind of just like, I thought I heard my dad, and then I went back to sleep. But ever since then, for some reason, I've always remembered that weird little experience, and it's so vivid in my head. And I just remember I heard it so clearly. Don't know what that was either. So those are my only two experiences. So now I'm going to share some experiences of some other people I know. So my little sister told me that one time my parents were gone somewhere, and she like had some friends over. She's like playing some music out of this little Bluetooth speaker up on the mantle, and she said at one point, all of a sudden, that little speaker just flew across the room. When she first told me this story, I was like, did it just like fall off the mantle and like slide a little bit? And she was like, no, it straight up flew across the room like someone just whacked it with a baseball bat. Nothing else happened after that. And like I mentioned before, I was raised in a Christian home. My dad's a pastor, so there's really no reason that there'd be anything weird like that in my parents' house, which is what my little sister was saying too. That's like nothing ever happens in mom and dad's house. But one of her friends that was over, she said he kind of had like a weird energy, maybe some like negative energy about him. That's the only thing we could think of, which it had to be something like that because things don't just fly off shelves. Another experience she had was at the house that she was living at with some of her friends. Her and one of her friends were like upstairs hanging out or something, and then all of a sudden they hear what sounds like something like either like falling down the stairs or like got thrown down the stairs. So she goes out to check and see like what the heck that was. She goes downstairs, there's nothing on the stairs. There's no one else in the house besides her friend who was up there with her. So these last few stories come from one of my cousins that used to live in Savannah. I've heard a few times that Savannah is supposed to be like really haunted, and there's all kinds of like crazy places there. And she did have a few stories to share. Now, I actually am going to need to read these because there's a lot of detail and I don't want to miss any of it. Just to respect and protect their privacy, I'm just going to refer to her as my cousin, and I'm going to refer to her husband as, Steve. The first thing she talks about is how she had quite a few experiences with sleep paralysis, but she isn't sure if they were necessarily like paranormal related. There was a time period she was experiencing it a lot, but she was also working a stressful job and like was stressed out with school, so she didn't know if maybe that was part of it. When she moved into this particular house, it started happening again, but she wasn't in those same stressful circumstances. She didn't really know what was triggering it, but she still says she doesn't know if it was paranormal. It could have been. So this is where I'm gonna pick up and start reading. But besides that, I always felt watched by a heavy presence. Chief, which is her dog, would stare at spots in the house and pant like he was concerned. Always trust your pets. Whenever we went to bed, the house sounded like it had other people in it. Like people using dishes, walking around, opening doors and windows, water running, etc. That escalated to what sounded like multiple voices whispering outside our bedroom door in the hallway at night. Nope. Then I started having insanely vivid and violent dreams. Super realistic ones where Steve kept getting hurt in the house. The worst one was when things were getting ridiculous. We had doors actually start closing in front of us and things would move around. I had this dream where I asked Steve to go check the house, which I did all the time because it sounded like someone was in our house. So in the dream, he goes to look and he's gone longer than normal, so I start calling his name from the bedroom. He doesn't reply. So eventually I get up and look down the hall. It looks like Steve is standing at the end of the hallway by the entrance to the kitchen and is staring into the kitchen. So I say, "Steve?" He doesn't reply again. So I turn my phone light on and shine it at him. This part is very creepy and disturbing, so if you are easily spooked, maybe skip ahead a few seconds. So I turn my phone light on and shine it at him. It's some mutated looking human, just deranged looking, and is wearing Steve's skin. And Steve's body is in the kitchen. Then it just starts this unholy shriek. It's raspy and shrill, but throaty and deep all the same time. As it's screaming, its jaw looks like it becomes unhinged and Steve's skin starts slipping off of it. I wake up at that point. Ugh. I know it's just a dream, but it freaking gives me chills. Fast forward a few days, and there's moonlight lighting our room, enough to see everything in it from the window. Now this is real life, she's not dreaming anymore. So I roll over and face the door to try and get comfy again. I get the feeling of being watched. So I watch the corner above the door, and ever so slowly, this thick black mist starts oozing out from the corner. It fills 3/4 of the room. And then this figure steps out of it. Full black, you couldn't actually see any features, but you could feel what it looks like. Weird, I know, but you could sense it. It slowly glided to Steve, and as the figure got closer to him, the room got hotter and hotter. It never got uncomfortable. It was that hot feeling you get if you're in rage. And that figure felt like it was in a rage. It felt like seething hatred. And by the time it reached Steve, it felt like it hated him so much that it wanted to kill him. I watched it bend over until it was face to face with Steve. I watched a shadowy hand reach towards his face, and I sat up at that point. It ripped its head back and stared up at me. That continued on for what felt like hours. I just stared at it, and it stared at me as it hung over Steve. Then it slowly retreated, and everything returned to normal as it did. Then I passed out. Oh my. So yeah, there's that. She said nothing that intense ever happened again, but I felt watched a lot more and felt like something was always right behind me from that day on. So this next story takes place in Alaska. That last one was Savannah. Now we're in Alaska. So the beginning part of the story, she explains that she went over to some friend's house, like her and Steve. Some of the guys decided they wanted to get out a Ouija board, which is never a good idea, but I don't know if anything really happened that night, but her friend said that they did kind of start experiencing some weird things afterwards. She did say that she found out that apparently the couple that lived in that apartment before her friends, the guy ended up killing the girl. Like, I don't know if they were married or not, but it was a bad relationship, obviously, and he ended up killing her in that apartment. So my cousin is wondering if what they started experiencing was related to that. At this point, she says, well, a couple of days later, Steve and I get into a little argument, nothing major, and things in our house start moving a little. We don't really freak out because sometimes there's tiny earthquakes. We shake it off as if it's nothing. Well, doors would close and block Steve off from me. She thinks that like whatever it was like closing these doors to try to like put a separation between them, almost as like a protective type thing. Like a glass would slide a few feet across our coffee table, stuff like that, but never directly in front of us. We'd see it out of the corner of our eye, so maybe one of the 3 dogs bumped into something, nothing solid. Then one day, we were play fighting, in parentheses. We like to slap each other's legs to see who the dogs would protect. It's stupid, I know, so we think it's funny. Also, the dogs know it's a game at this point. But, so they started play fighting, and she says, and we stopped because Steve gets up to go to the bathroom. So basically, he gets up to go to the bathroom, and he like stops for a second because he was watching the TV and he like looked to go tell my cousin something. And in front of us both, this really heavy coin bank launches itself off a cube organizer we have. All the dogs are on the other side of the living room with me, so no one is near it. It just launched directly by Steve's path. Then a piece of petrified wood goes, and then a bottle of water launches off it too towards him. And at that point, I just stood up and was like, okay, ghost, get out of my house. I don't need you to protect me if that's what you're doing, but just leave. And then nothing happened again with the little shrug emoji. And I proceeded to tell her, 1, I give you major kudos for just standing up and like yelling into the room because I honestly don't know what I would have done in that situation. I like to think I'd yell at it to leave, but you never know. So yeah, that's all the stories I have for now. Feel free to leave some comments below or on Facebook or wherever if you've had any weird experiences or know anyone that has. Obviously, I'm very interested in that kind of stuff. It scares me, but I'm still interested. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. This was a little bit longer of a video than usual, but I just had so many spooky things I wanted to talk about. Stay tuned for my last spooky video. It'll be going up next week. I don't want to give you any hints, but I will tell you it's not a vlog video, so that'll be new. But yeah, thanks for watching. Feel free to check out the rest of my channel. I post new cover songs every Tuesday, and I post new vlogs and other random fun videos every Thursday. You can follow me on all social media at its_just Kaitlin, or on Facebook is It's Just Kaitlin. So yeah, until then, stay spooky and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!